We begin Exodus chapter 11 tonight. Exodus chapter 11. In chapter 10, we have record of the 8th and ninth plagues numerically. The plague of the devastation of the locust, and then you have the plague of darkness. And in chapter 10, it is revealed to us that some of the servants of Pharaoh, and which is likely indicative of much of the population of Egypt, were beginning to plead with Pharaoh that he come to a resolution so that the wrath of Jehovah essentially could stop afflicting them, to send the people on their way. Pharaoh, being hard-headed and hard-hearted, would continue along this path that's going to lead to this 10th and final plague that is referenced and given an overview in chapter 11. At the close of the plague of darkness, you have Pharaoh saying unto Moses in verse 28 of chapter 10, "Get thee from me, take heed to thyself, seek my face no more, for in that day that thou seest my face, thou shalt die." And so Pharaoh, taking in his anger, taking a stand and putting out the threat that if he sees Moses again, if Moses approaches him again, that he's going to put him to death as king over Egypt. And Moses says, "Thou hast spoken well, I will see thy face again no more." If you stop there, it seems that perhaps Moses leaves from his presence there. But I believe that we have a continuation of Moses' words in his presence if you skip down to verse 4 of chapter 11. But first you have an interjection here by God to Moses. The Lord said unto Moses, chapter 11 and verse 1, "Yet will I bring one plague more upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterwards he will let you go hence. When he shall let you go, he shall surely thrust you out hence altogether. Speak now in the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold." And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people. Now imagine with me, Moses still there in the presence of Pharaoh. I don't believe that he's left and come back to him, considering Moses has already said, "You're not going to see my face any longer. I'm not coming back to you anymore." And so Moses said, he continues what he's about to respond to Pharaoh, verse 4. Moses said, "Thus saith the Lord, about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts. And there shall be a great cry, throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall there be like it any more. But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue, against man or beast, that you may know how that the Lord doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. And all these thy servants shall come down unto me, and bow down themselves unto me, saying, Get thee out, and all the people that follow thee, and after that I will go out." And he went out from Pharaoh in a great anger. And so we're told that Pharaoh, where there's indication that Pharaoh is angry with Moses and puts his foot down and saying, "I'm going to kill you if I see you again." And Moses says, "You won't see me again." But Moses does not respond calmly. He doesn't respond scared. He responds actually with the same wrath that God is using him for, and showing Pharaoh that God is not pleased with his continual rebellion, his continual rejection of letting the people go, and that God is going to exercise his judgment against them in a very supreme way, in a superior way, in this final plague. And so Moses and Aaron, it says, well, in verse 9, the Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. And Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, and the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he would not let the children of Israel go out of his land. And so verses 9 and 10 very much are an overview of the nature of how that Moses and Aaron have continued to bring these wonders and these miracles, these powerful plagues before the eyes of Pharaoh, the Egyptians, and the Israelites, and yet Pharaoh's heart had continued to be hardened. It connects back to chapter 10 and verse 27, where we read there that the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart and he would not let them go. But here we have uh, the introduction or the bringing in of that final plague. I say introduction, but really, God has mentioned this plague before, and he has revealed to Moses before that this would take place. So you have seemingly an interjection here in verses 1 through 3 where God is informing Moses that he's going to bring this plague, but he's also informing Moses that now is the time that the people of Israel should begin gathering uh, things of value from the Egyptians. What questions or comments? Yes. Right. I believe that. I believe that God had given him multiple opportunities to allow that, but God, in His infinite wisdom, knew that that was not going to happen, and He knew what Pharaoh's response would be to each of these, and so in the carrying out of these particular plagues, Pharaoh's heart continued to be hardened, and God's ultimate plan was brought to fruition in this, and it's certainly God's power and providence and uh, foreknowledge surpass my comprehension, and so I certainly don't fully understand all of that and how it works. But when now that we're on this side of history and we look back to all that God has accomplished, and it is He has certainly brought about His will, which is good. Um, right, 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 right. One thing that would benefit us, I believe, first of all, getting to know God more and more through Scripture and His nature, and that He's not a God that just wants to move pawns around on a chessboard, um, and but having a complete reverence for Him as God, to the point that even if God did uh, manipulate Pharaoh's heart or use him for his own purpose, that he has that ability or that power. I don't think that he did. I don't think that he, um, in any way, changed Pharaoh's free will, ability to choose. Yeah, yeah, right, right. That's right. That's right. And what I was saying in response to that was not directed at you, but in general, because so many in the world want to be God's judge instead of just listening to him and believing him. And they think that he should do things the way that they think that he should do them, when that puts us in his position. That makes us God. Um, Very good question though, and it's certainly enters into the realm of God's mind that we don't fully understand, and the um, carrying out of how things happen in this world. Any other questions or additional comments related to those? That's right. It's good. And the question comes, what material am I made of? Am I going to humble myself before him, or am I going to stand against him in pride? Right. That's right. Pharaoh and in Egypt, it is my understanding that that position was really seen as a divine position, as if Pharaoh would have been like a god man to the Egyptians, even. And so there is a great deal of pride and haughtiness and arrogance that came along with that position as well. And while he, they offer things to their own God's little g, um, he did not want to, it seems, seem weak before the Egyptians, yet the Egyptians saw right through it because they saw that Jehovah is obviously more powerful than anything that Egypt has at its disposal. And they were wanting the Israelites out of there. They knew as long as the Israelites were there, things were not happening well for them. So in chapter 11 and verse 1, God brings back to the mind of Moses that this final plague is coming, a plague that he has uh, mentioned back in chapter 4, in Exodus 4, verses 22 and 23. This is before Moses has fully returned to Egypt. And the Lord said to Moses, when thou goest to return into Egypt, verse 21, see that thou do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in thine hand, but I will harden his heart, that he shall not let the people go. And thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And I say unto thee, let my son go, that he may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn. Certainly, the penalty of this plague also brings to our minds the uh, exercise of murder of children that Pharaoh had brought upon the Israelites. Back in chapter 1, we read of how that every man child was to be put to death. Pharaoh charged all his people, chapter 1 and verse 22, saying, "Every son that is born you shall cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive." And so you have this coming full circle, if you will, of him killing innocent babes, infants, and now God is going to execute judgment in this final plague against Egypt. And it's going to show, not only is it bringing judgment against them, showing Pharaoh's weakness, but also uh, um, the impotence of the Egyptian gods, as we've noted along the way. And we've looked at how that these plagues would have been brought against all of their gods. In chapter 12 and verse 12, remember, God will say, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast. Against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord." So he informs Moses that this final plague is coming, and you're going to be let go now. Now we've seen impatience at times. You've it seems to be the case that some time has passed. Some have speculated that maybe up to a year has passed from the beginning of their deliverance to the point of now they're about to be actually delivered in the uh, progress of these plagues. And so now God informs Moses, "Speak now. Speak now in the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold." And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants and in the sight of the people. This indicating to us the effect that the plagues were having upon the Egyptians, I believe, and that this was now an opportune time for the Israelites to then go to the Egyptians and say, "Jehovah, the one that's been causing these plagues, has said we need to receive from you these valuables." I have an idea that at this point, the Egyptians were more than willing. They would gladly give whatever amount of money they had to give to get the Israelites out of their land because of what devastation has come to them and the fear that was in them. And so God is uh, telling Moses, this is the opportunity for that. And so then we come back to the discourse between Moses and Pharaoh, and really the final words of Moses to Pharaoh here, and telling him about midnight. This is what Jehovah has said through Moses: "About midnight will I go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of beasts." If we're not careful, we very easily miss the seriousness, the um, the pain in this plague that would have happened in Egypt. And the firstborn, oftentimes our mind might immediately go to a child, an infant. We're not talking about, while there may have been some children or infants that lost their lives being firstborn on this night, we're talking about grown men. We're talking about fathers, grandfathers, great grandfathers. Interestingly, this particular Pharaoh must not have been uh, the firstborn in his family because he would survive. Um, I heard someone trying to paint a picture. If you imagine yourself as a mother on this night who is married to a husband. Her husband was the firstborn in his family. And together they have a son or sons, and one being the firstborn. And the husband's father was the firstborn in his family, and the mother's father was the firstborn in his family. And on this night, she would have lost her father, her father in law, her husband, and her firstborn son in an instant. Death is never pleasant. And it's important to remember that God has complete authority over life. He is the giver of life. And it is only God who has the complete authority to uh, take away life and to give others that authority at times. He's given authority into the hands of governments to exercise the penalty of death for those who are evildoers. But God holds that sole authority, supreme authority, and here he's bringing a great plague, a great pestilence, a great devastation and suffering in the land of Egypt. And he says, there will be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall be like it any more. But against the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue. That's a saying that they would have been familiar with, a proverbial or idiomatic saying, kind of like today when you're talking about someone who is gentle and never violent, that they couldn't hurt a fly. Well, here he's saying that he uses a phrase that they're familiar with, that no harm whatsoever is coming to Israel, that a dog's not even so much as going to point his tongue at them, which um, some have noted is what a dog might do as he is prepared to attack. But a dog is not even going to harm them on this night. So that he says that you may know how that the Lord hath put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. And all these thy servants shall come down unto me and bow down themselves unto me. Remember, these are the words of Jehovah through Moses to Pharaoh, that even your servants are going to bow down to me, that is Jehovah, saying, get thee out, and all the people that followed thee, and after that I will go out. And he went out from Pharaoh in a great anger. So Moses reveals to Pharaoh what is about to happen. I can only imagine how many of the Egyptians may have tried to prepare for this. But they would learn on that night that no matter what they might do, no matter if they sat up all night long watching their loved ones, if they tried to in some way provide protection for them, that it was not going to help them prevent the death of the firstborns throughout Egypt on that night. But yet you have among the Israelites a superior protection. It's interesting when you consider this plague, the precision of this plague. You know, today, if a government or if a nation rather attacks another nation and they can shoot a bomb into a particular area, a missile into a particular area, and they can wipe out a number of people all at once. But they're not going to be able to wipe out only the firstborn of every family in the way that this was precisely done. And so there's precision that we see, but also we see the pain that is there, that has ultimately been brought about because of Pharaoh's rejection of God's command. And when we think about sin in our own lives, that's what it comes down to, rejecting God's commands. But also we see God's power in this plague. And then we see the protection that God has for the Israelites, that there's a difference between the Egyptians and the Israelites. That God is setting apart the Israelites. By the way, as we will see in chapter 12, that didn't mean that the Israelites were just automatically protected, but rather there was actually something that they had to do, something very specific that they had to do, something that took great effort on their part in order to do, and also involved some sacrifice and pain on their part so that they would be protected from this plague on this occasion, which is a lesson for us even today. Many have this mindset of the grace of God that once you're a recipient of God's grace, that there's nothing that you can do to resist it. There's nothing that uh, you can do essentially to receive it, but essentially that you're a recipient of it because God chose you, and that uh, you're going to be saved because of it. There's nothing to do on your part, and that nothing could be further from the truth. We have even example here that even in the days of the Israelites, that there was something that they had to do in order to receive the benefit of God's grace here. What questions or comments to this point? No, and you're fine. You may be correct about that. I have to go back and yes, ma'am. And we'll dig into this even more, Lord willing, next week as we continue into chapter 12. I do know that back in chapter 4 and verse 23, he said, I would slay thy son, even thy firstborn. Um, there's a reason in my mind I have firstborn males. And um, okay. Hmm. Okay. And we'll dig into this a little more when we again continue into chapter 12, and hope, and maybe there will be, I'll go back and look more closely and see if we have the right. It's an excellent question. Um, as you come into chapter 12 now, you have specific instruction that's going to be given to the Israelites, and there's great depth of foundational things that are taking place in chapter 12 for uh, the Israelites, the people who would descend from Jacob, and now the relationship, the covenant relationship that they're going to have with God, and the Mosaic law that would go forth from this. But we're told even that God's going to establish a calendar for them beginning with this month. This month that they were in, that it would be the first month. And so you have the foundation for the Jewish calendar in this chapter. You have the first time that the word congregation would be used in reference to the Israelites being used in this chapter. And then you see the consecration that's taking place, that God is making it possible for them to be separated from Egypt, and he's also setting in place a sacred memorial that they can keep and go back to year after year. So it sets them apart from Israel. It gives them an annual memorial as God's people, and it protects Israel from the death of the firstborn, the carrying out of the what would become known as the Passover memorial or Passover feast, because this will be the actual event of God passing over the Israelites on the night that he would put to death the firstborn in all of Egypt. But also, in thinking about chapter 12, as we enter into chapter 12, not only we see the Jewish calendar, we see the congregation of the Israelites, we see the consecration, but also we see uh, beautiful choreography of God, that he is organizing and arranging something that would continue to need to be observed by the Israelites, which would be helpful to their reverence toward him, their obedience to him, their obligation that they had to God, and also fulfilling the purpose that they had ultimately, that they would bring about the Christ, that through their lineage, ultimately the tribe of Judah, that the Christ would come about. And we see the supreme fulfillment of everything that we read of in chapter 12 in Christ, who is called our Passover, 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 7. And so the Passover memorial being fulfilled in Christ, and Christ himself, on the night that he would partake of the meal that would be prepared for this occasion, would institute a different memorial, a memorial which we're able to partake of every first day of the week. Something that's interesting to me, and kind of, uh, I guess, perturbs me a little bit and concerns me, is that there are some Christians, and I imagine they have well meaning intention, but they want to go back around Easter time. They want to prepare a Passover meal, and to see, and I guess to kind of try to experience that. I don't think that they really want to experience what took place according to Exodus chapter 12. And in saying that they're wanting to experience that, essentially, we're leaving off the significance that God fulfilled this occasion, this event in Christ, and has given us a different memorial meal to partake in, which also impresses upon us the need to never minimize the Lord's Supper and minimize the feast that it is, in a sense, not a feast to nurture our physical bodies, but a feast to remember what Christ has done for us. And so, looking at the seriousness and the pain that took place in the death of the firstborn in Egypt, calls to our minds the significance of the sacrifice of Jesus, even. What questions or comments? Yeah. Exodus 13:15. Okay. All right. Thank you. And someone else have something? All right. Lord willing, we'll pick up there and dig into chapter 12 a little more next week.